Welcome to Hospitality Internships, the premier global talent network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fourth installment of Learners to Leaders series. Today, we was focusing on peak performance. And today, I have four illustrious panelists with me today. First, the OG, Dr. Christine Cleaver. She's an associate professor of practice at School of Sport, Tourism, and Hospitality Management at Temple University. We have Dr. Miranda Keterling Lynch, associate professor of the Chapman School of Hospitality and Tourism Management at Florida International University. Dr. Ethan Chang, associate professor of Hospitality and Tourism, assistant professor of Hospitality and Tourism Management, Western Carolina University, and Andrea Bañez Napoli, academic program coordinator for Universidad Católica Andrés Bello, Caracas, Venezuela. So welcome all of you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Today in our peak performance, we're going to cover 6 basic areas. And our first one we're going to talk about is team dynamics. So Christine, first starting with you, and thinking about effective team dynamics, and we look at trust and building trust and mutual respect. What are some key elements that you think of when you're having effective team dynamics?
Well, I think it's important if you are leading that team that you're observing the team so that you're understanding how individuals are interacting with each other, how they are speaking with each other, how they're communicating with each other. And I feel like every team is different, like very, very vastly different, just like every class I teach is different, that sometimes you need to really tweak kind of the dynamics in order to gain the trust. So, I had a class. So I have a class called the Event Experience, and they actually plan an event. And I could see, I think it was 2 semesters ago, they weren't really gelling with one another. So I was like, I have to figure out something here to figure this out. So I actually did the spaghetti and marshmallow activity where you have to build the tower with the spaghetti and marshmallows. And I think a few things happened there. One, they learned to trust each other and work together. But 2, I think it actually came at a good time to foster some relationships rather than it, because it was really getting to a point that I'm like, oh, they have to work with each other for 16 weeks and they have to produce an event, and it just wasn't quite getting there. So I think sometimes you have to observe and, kind of take a step back and, all right, what are some techniques I can use in order to foster the trust and foster really building a good team.
All right. Adriana, what say you?
Yes, well, I think in the dynamic or in the hospitality industry, effective team dynamics are shaped by clear communication, for example. Then we have trust. Team members should feel confident in their colleagues and believe they can really on each other. And for example, mutual respect, or as I said, clear communications, or for example, diversity and inclusion is a topic.
Great, thank you. Miranda, what say you?
Yeah, I was thinking exactly the DEI aspect of things. I think that in order to have effective team dynamics, there needs to be, as everyone said, trust, respect, etc. I think that we have to educate ourselves first on DEI aspects so that we can then foster an environment in which everyone feels respected, because who knows how many microaggressions are occurring in the workplace that people are unintentionally committing, right?
Unconscious bias, right? And we think about belonging at the same time, and what that sense of belonging is, and just in our tribes or our groups or however, what do we call them? It's such a big part of our teams is because we're thinking about them as going, I need to belong in this team, and if you don't feel like you belong, you're not going to be an active participant in that team at the same time. So Ethan, what's that you?
Yeah, so I totally agree with all speakers today. I believe effective communication is the key element, since most employees have different backgrounds, educational background, languages, learning styles. So I do believe effective communication is the key element. So I believe usually I would say clear shared goals, and also goal setting, some recognitions to give them feedbacks. No matter external, internal rewards will definitely help with the success of the team. So, and I also agree with Christine about, I should talk about team building activities that will help motivate employees and also engage more about at work. So those are my some feedback about the question.
Great, thank you. And we have to think about too is that, when considering me, there's no I in team, but there is a me in team, right? And we think about each one of us having to make sure that we have our own thing, even as leaders. We have to make sure that we have ourselves together before anybody else. And I like to talk about that all the time with students going, it's got to be about you first before it can be about anybody else. So you've got to have everything together for yourself. And that's a very hard task in itself to figure out and to moving forward with a team at the same time, especially if you're leading the team, not just being a follower of the team, but leading the team at the same time. So let's move on to leadership techniques. So Miranda, I want to start with you on this one. So, we're in a fast-paced environment when we think about leadership and the things that we have to do, and those proven leadership strategies that we have to motivate people to go to their full potential. What kind of strategies would you suggest to do that?
I think the easiest thing that you can do in our industry as a leader is to get down and dirty with your team, right? And the easiest example that I can think of in food service particularly is instead of instructing your people, do this, do this, do this, when you see that your people need help, get your hands dirty and help them, right?
Absolutely. I can't, again, as a former chef, I can't stress enough. I was just talking with an employee the other day about this exact thing of taking off this coat, rolling up the sleeves and doing dishes, serving a table, busting a table, no matter what it is, because you show them that just says, oh my gosh, they're in the boat rowing with me at the same time as well too. And it's not a hierarchy or us and them, it's us and we as a team together. Completely agree. Adriana, what say you?
Well, I think set clear goals and expectations, provide direction and purpose, and then transformational leadership, inspire and motivate by creating a vision for the future, encouraging innovation and leading by example.
Great, thank you. So Ethan.
Yeah, so for me, when I work with my team, I think mentorship program works a lot. So some experienced employee take care of the new employees. Manager takes some progress check frequently, not like directly, but like coaching, mentoring, advising. I also would like to mention about gamification, some competition concepts that's run some competition internally and then give them some bonus rewards that helps a lot about to see their full potential engagement. And finally, I would say listening and feedback definitely works a lot. So not just speaking, not just advising, but listen to what they talk about and give you some feedback, and not just performance review, but some informal conversation meetings definitely help being a good leader.
Thank you for bringing that up too. I'm such a big proponent in how reflection helps everybody understand what they've come through, what they've done, but also the things that they're going to do with the group moving forward. And that's so, whether you're writing it down, and I do multiple different things with my students. They write it down, they do a video, they do a stand-up presentation of their reflection. It gives them different waves of public speaking at the same time. But when you're talking about it a little bit more, kind of solidifies things going, I went through this. And this is the good, the bad, the ugly that I went through. And it really brings them to a whole different area of understanding about themselves, as well as their teams, as well as the project. Christine, what say you?
So I agree with what some of my colleagues have said, and I'm going to just add on to that is definitely the mentor and coaching. I've said this before in other webinars, like it's okay to make a mistake, and building kind of that platform of empowerment, meaning that if you have an idea or you're showing initiative, really empowering the employee to be able to go forward and not have to ask you every minute detail. That really, really helps. Definitely leading by example. I try to model behavior when doing things, so leading by example. One thing too, I also find helpful is vulnerability. Saying it's okay to say, I don't know that. Can you actually inform me on that? So that you're not always that you should not be the smartest one in the room. Like that's what the team is there for. So really like understanding, and a lot of times too, you'll have one individual on your team who's like a super user of something, and hey, can you do a training for everyone? So really, and again, this kind of goes back to the really monitoring your team and really looking and watching and observing and really like playing their strengths, so that they add to the team environment.
And you bring up such a great word that has been sounds kind of like the word of the year almost so far. This part, vulnerability, being vulnerable to the things that you don't know, and not having to have all the answers. Right?
Mhm.
I don't know, but I can find out. Being recent and relevant and being that resourceful person also helps them to go, wait a minute, they're just like me and you. And again, the thing I talked about before with the hierarchy of being everybody's on the same team together, and even the instructor, the teacher, the professor at the same time going, let's figure it out together. It's a team process at the same time. Thank you. Okay, now let's move on to communication skills. Now, those of you who joined us last month, we had a whole 45 minutes on communication. But this one, we're talking a little bit more about the peak performance communication. So, Ethan, we're thinking about preventing misunderstandings and trying to enhance teamwork. What are some clear and open communication? How do you ensure that so it's effective? What kind of techniques would you use?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the last question about the mentorship programs, even mentors that actually can check with your mentors, some of the group leaders. I also will say design some of the group chats, like virtual communication platforms that you can do to make sure that everyone's on the same page. I will also use some digital notes, message, besides emails or just writing, and also some informal conversations. So since a GM, you should talk with customers. You can also take your employees by just maybe 3 to 5 minutes informal conversation during lunch or at work. So I will also say that's some informal conversation. If you know your colleagues, they have birthday, and then just send in some birthday card with some small gift. Definitely those helps a lot. And besides talk about the business, some of the work stuff, you can also ask about some of the family updates. Just share some, take care of your employee, just that you take care of your customers. So I think those small steps actually will bring a lot of good energy and morale.
And Ethan, thank you. You bring up a really good point, especially when you think about how we communicate, right? Our verbals, our nonverbals, and we think about our nonverbals and our body language, but also we think of communication as in emails, text messages, writing, notes, cards. Those kind of things send a whole aspect of when we think about having peak performance and having communication styles and skills that are going to have in a team working together have that peak performance. We have to make sure that we're working with the different groups. One thing that I always like to talk about too is like, some of us right now have 5 different generations that are in our classrooms. I have students in my classes that are 19 all the way to 65. And they all communicate differently. They all need things. They all need feedback in a different way. They all want to communicate with me in a different way at the same time as well too. And having to adjust to that, understanding that. So that's a little bit harder part of what being a leader is these days, is figuring that out, and being part of having a great team and a high performing team is really knowing the communication, but the styles and the skills that you need to have to communicate with them. So Adriana, what do you say?
Yes, I think ensuring clear and open communication within a team involves using multiple channels to disseminate information, holding regular meetings, for example, or and fostering open door policy, techniques like active listening and clear articulation of expectations, or as I said, regular team meetings.
Great, thank you. Miranda.
I was just thinking that in terms of communication, one of the things that I like to do, not just with my students or with my colleagues or supervisors, et cetera, but even in personal communication, is when I need to deliver a message, I will give them the opportunity to share with me what they heard, because what we say to someone isn't always what they're hearing, right? And I would hate for someone to leave a conversation, especially if it's an important conversation about opportunities or areas for improvement, for example. I would hate for someone to walk away with the incorrect message, if you will.
And you bring up a really good point. Lost in translation, right? Are you really hearing what I said? Did they listen to you or did they hear you? Two completely separate things.
Right.
Christine, what say you?
So something I have found in the past, I don't know, 3 years that has been helpful, because going back to Tom, what you were saying, the 5 generations that are in either the workforce, the classroom, also too, different demographics that are in your classroom, different things, is actually working as a team to establish a communication plan. Everybody communicates differently and wants to communicate in their way, but sometimes that doesn't work. So, for class, example, in the beginning of class, I'll go through, okay, these are the different things that we can use. This is what's available to us. Let's come up with a plan. And then everybody agrees to that plan and to use those systems. And if we feel like there's a breakdown, fine, but let's agree together to use this. And I have found that works really well, because once they've agreed to use it and agreed to try, then they actually make an effort, versus if you're telling someone to do something, automatically, nope, I don't want to do it. I don't know how to use it. So that, I feel, really has been helpful, because I'll be honest, the 5 generations is very, very, very challenging. I even with the students now, and Tom and you and I were talking, like when I take them to immersive projects and they're talking, sometimes I have to stop and ask them to clarify what they actually said, because they'll say something and I'm like, that has a different meaning in my generation. So sometimes you just have to, and again, I guess that goes back to the vulnerability of saying, look, we all have to work together, so let's try. Everyone agrees to it, and like kind of majority, if we get to like a majority vote, I've had that. And then I don't know, they'll establish things like, okay, we're going to use Teams as our communication tool, we're going to establish channels, like, they'll come up with this plan. And I'm finding it successful if I let the group actually come up with the plan, rather than if I designate the plan.
And you bring up such a good point there, because having been teaching for 20 years now, in the early days, it makes me sound really old. I used to say, this is how you're going to communicate. It was a top-down leadership style at that point. Again, coming out of the industry as a chef and an event director, it was those kind of things. You're telling your employees what to do. Here's what needs to happen. Couples need this, a convention, associations. And now I had to change that into a little bit more of going, okay, I want you to do it. Now you got to need a little bit of guidance, because sometimes you still have the animosity. Sometimes you still have the different generations saying, well, we do it this way, and trying to figure out that common ground, because they all do have common ground. We all have that thread that links through us, and it's communication and how we want to communicate, and that we do effectively want to communicate because we want to do a good job. Nobody goes into it wanting to do a bad job. So that's really part of where that communication comes in and really strikes that balance within the group. Perfect. Okay. Adriana, on to you. So we're going to talk about conflict resolution now. And boy, oh boy, this could be a whole separate topic in itself. We think about opportunities for growth, right? And resolving conflicts and different approaches that we could take constructively with our team. Adriana, what would you say would you use as examples of conflict resolution for an opportunity for growth with your groups?
Yes, I think approaching conflict constructively involves active listening, empathy, and finding a common ground. And a specific example is mediating a disagreement between team members by facilitating a meeting, for example, where each party can express their opinion or their perspective without interruption. I think we have to focus on the problem and not in the personalities. And then we have to, or we need active listening and collaborating and problem solving, and then focus on future improvement, like learn from the situation to avoid repetition.
Great. Thank you so very much. Miranda.
Yeah, one of the things I do with my class is we do a group project, and right at the beginning of our working together, or they're working together as a group, is they discuss amongst each other the ways in which they'd like to handle conflict, and they agree before even jumping into that journey what their conflict resolution strategies will be. And I think one other thing, that's been very successful. I highly recommend it. And I think another thing we have to remember with regards to conflict resolution is that it's okay if it's not immediately resolved. As long as there is no harm being done in the immediate time period, it's okay if people need a minute to think, to cool down, etc.
Completely agree. I mean, just taking me all the way back to being in my own teams and my own organization and having to run all my chefs or all of my event people as well too, and having again different generations doing. Well, I've done it this way for 40 years, and I just started doing it, and that conflict actually is a form of team cohesiveness because they're learning about one another, whether they like it or not, but also to learn to work together. And the interesting part about this, long story short, is that given by the end of the event, these people are on a team together. They're working great together. They want to work together even more at different events because why? They went through that conflict process and figured it out. And probably the best part for me was that I didn't really have to be part of it because they dealt with it themselves and they actually told me about that they were having that conflict. So when we think about conflict, it isn't always bad. It's a learning process. It's a learning thing. Christine, what say you?
So something that I do with the teams in the beginning is a personal assessment inventory, which is kind of this document that, I don't know, they kind of write out their background and what they're comfortable with. And, I will refer to that, if there is an issue, like, on your team, did you read so-and-so's personal assessment inventory and kind of understand where they're coming from? So I definitely use a lot of put yourself in their shoes kind of conversations. I also do a lot of, let's learn from this situation. And then the big thing that I talk about a lot when talking it through is what is fact versus opinion. Because a lot of time the resolution can be based on what the facts of what's happening versus everyone's opinion, because everybody, again, going back to the listening and listening versus hearing, sometimes those waters can get muddied, and then you could have dynamics between different team members. So really listening for the facts of the situation I think is really important. So I think and ultimately, I will say, okay, when we get to a spot, what did we learn from this? Like, what can we learn from this going forward? And, at the time of going through the conflict resolution, it may be that people aren't exactly happy with the resolution, but they can see the learning process going forward. So they're able to resolve things in the future.
And you also think about for all of us too, this is like a therapy session for some of us, right? Because we're having to relive a little bit about what we went through in industry at the same time, but also with student groups also, right? And I always tell my students in my classes, there's always going to be one group that's going to have an issue. And every single semester for 20 years, there's always been one group that hasn't gotten along. And the issue comes up, oh, I want to fire this person. Well, one of the rules is that you can't fire anybody. You need to deal with it. And that's kind of ultimately what some people like to go to the nuclear aspect of it. We want to fire them, but that's not solving that conflict. They're still going to be part of the team. They're still going to be in the class. You're still going to have to deal with them in the project or in the event at the same time. Ethan, what say you?
Yeah, so I would say no matter for industry or education, teamwork usually will have some issues like, people have different expectation, goals, and so I would say choose someone who can be the team leader or a mutual person who can calm both party down if we have some conflicts. And I would say have some of the regular meetings, and then like peer review. It's not like the end of project period, but it's like progress check review. And since each team member has different kind of perspective, sometimes people think about 70% it's my maximum. Some people want to do 100% the best they can. They just have a different expectation and goals for the project or the work. So I would say they just have a meeting, and I would love to join as faculty to, listen and try to give them feedback, help them to find the balance. So they may have some conflict, but they finally find a balance, and finally they made a good outcome of their project outcomes. So I was to listen to their comments and opinions, and then try to guide them to find a better solution for the team. And of course, appreciate all their feedback and work. Try to say something that the good things, and then try something we can make better for opportunity. And then finally, they have a better team relationships and outcomes.
Great, thank you so much. Here's one of the things that, as we're talking, and I'm thinking about this as well too, and we just, covered communication skills, is that how we used to communicate, but how we communicate now. And I look over my time in industry as well as in education, how we talk to one another, but also how we communicated, well, in person for the most part, but now we have texting, right? We have emails, we have a lot of different ways that we can do this. We have social media at the same time as well too. We have Teams, all these kind of things that technology that's helping us to communicate at the same time. And there can be that lost in translation thing. So when we're thinking about conflict resolution, some things can get lost in there to come back. And that's kind of where the learning aspect is as well too. Sometimes you have to go back to old school and talk in person, right? Almost not even over a screen if you can, but in person, to make sure that you're fully sitting down around a table or in a group, understanding what each other is really meaning at the same time. So let's move on to our building a collaborative culture. So Christine, we're thinking about active participation and contributing to team success. And in that collaborative culture of what we do in our teams, whether in industry or in education at the same time too, what kind of steps would you take to create that collaborative culture in your teams?
So this is always very interesting for me to watch, because in one of my classes, they're divided into teams, but those teams have to work with each other in order to successfully produce an event. The students are used to working in group projects, like with group projects with just their group. And, there's usually they kind of suss out the dynamics of like the group leader and, the person that's doing 125% and those that do 100 and some that do 10. And they, go through that process. But in this project, they have to learn to not only work in their group and actually collaborate in their group, but then collaborate with the other groups. And I think it's a really, really, they struggle for like the first 4 to 5 weeks. Then they start to get it. But once they actually produce the event, which is like in week 9, I want to say, then after that, they're very collaborative with things. You can see that even too in other classes. So I think even too in the industry, when you're working on a team, I serve as a committee chair for a group. And, when we're collaborating on things, knowing, again, each other's like strengths and weaknesses, that really helps kind of put the dynamics together in order to collaborate with other organizations, other people. I'm a big collaborator. I love to collaborate, which is kind of crazy because I'm also type A. So I like to also be in charge, but I find a really amazing energy from collaborating. And I think if you foster that energy, it really, really, it works very well and assists very well with teams, students, whatever you're doing.
And thank you for that, Christina. And I, was writing down some things as you were talking too, because we think about collaboration, but we think about them build courage and confidence that they're building at that same time. And those collaborative cultures create that for themselves of going, this is actually working. And I feel good about it. And we're going to get this done and we're going to make this happen. And all of a sudden you're trying to build that in them, but they don't see it because we can't. It's almost like an addict. They have to tell themselves, we can't, oh, you did good. They have to tell themselves that. And that's where that courage comes from. That takes them into a whole other step of leadership. and defining themselves and going, well, how am I going to do this? This is how I am. And that courage really helps them build that confidence in themselves. And that's why, that collaborative culture is so very important when they're, and especially in our younger years, is to be able to reach out and kind of get out of that comfort zone that we're in. Like I always call it my comfortable, uncomfortable scenario. And that's kind of where that collaborative culture comes in at the same time. Ethan, what say you?
Yep. So when I try to create and maintain collaborative culture, one of the steps I usually will do will be use technology to bring teams together. So some people are not good at public speaking. They help team members build the bonds. So I think just make them feel safe and comfortable to speak by using some different platforms. That will be great. And also, like I mentioned, make room for the team members. Some people, they may not good at speaking at work in class, but they love to just reply emails, reply to messages, and actually can contribute more about on the duties or the jobs they need to do. So I would say those tools definitely can help better for two-way communication.
And thank you for bringing the key things is knowing where you are. Like Christine and I both are type A, right? But not everybody's that type, and not everybody's an extrovert or introvert or an ambivert. It's somewhere in between there. They're balancing that act of themselves and figuring out how they want to collaborate with others at the same time. Maybe they want to pull back in certain areas, or maybe when they're stronger in other areas, because we know that we all go to our strengths, right? You always want to show your strength, but you have to work on your weaknesses, as we talk about. And we think about that collaborative culture of going, we want to pull to everybody's strengths, and doing that whole assessment, like Christine was talking about earlier, is figuring out where you are. What are you good? What are you not good at? Where should we put you at? Because I really want to play to your strengths, but I also want to work on those things that you need to work on at the same time. Miranda, what say you?
So I agree with what everybody said. I don't know if I have anything valuable to add because everybody's hit on so many great points. I guess the only thing that I could add to the conversation is maybe giving people an opportunity to see where they can collaborate and how it's going to benefit them to collaborate, right? So maybe pointing out opportunities for collaboration. I taught a class recently in which I had individual assignments, and a student suggested, well, hey, can I work with someone else so that we can bounce ideas off of each other? Absolutely, absolutely. That is a great opportunity for collaboration. Let's all do it, right? So I think inviting them to take advantage of opportunities, to offer suggestions for opportunities to collaborate, I think there's value in that.
I completely agree. And to add to that too, when they're making the suggestion, they now have more agency in that. They're now more involved. They're now more ownership to go, hey, I kind of really want to do this. What do you think about this? Absolutely, run with it. And they become so flabbergasted. They're like, oh my gosh, I'm starting to lead. I'm starting to gain some confidence in myself and my abilities to do things and work with others. Perfect. Thank you. And finally, Adriana.
Yes, well, I have been working on project management with the COIL projects, and the experience has been interesting because they have my opportunities. My students have the opportunity to collaborate with the students, for example, from the United States, Canada, Amsterdam. So I'm really grateful because creating and maintaining a collaborative culture requires setting the tone from the top, and this involves encouraging open communication, for example, and recognizing collaborative efforts. Team building activities I had, for example, or we had, because I worked with a lot of professors, we had icebreaker activities, and then we shared goals and rewards, and recognize and celebrate the collaboration.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, we're on to our final sixth area here. Miranda, this is all about you, your personal experience with high-performing teams. So we think about different factors or characteristics that contribute to success of a team and those most high-performing teams. So can you talk to us a little bit about the most high-performing team you've ever worked on or worked with?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very fortunate that I've worked in some great teams. And some of the common factors among those high-performing teams is regular communication, Maintaining our goal right up front. For example, if we're working on a research project, we write down our purpose and keep it at the forefront of all of our meetings, conversations, and efforts. And also really playing to each other's strengths, knowing that one person really enjoys doing a certain aspect of that project and is very good at it, allowing them to take over that aspect, and then taking over what others are best at, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I'm huge smile on my face because, when I do research with colleagues, I'm the lit review guy. That's the first thing that I say. I'm not good at any of the other stuff. I can do it. I don't want to do it. It's just dissonance for me. But where my happy spot is where nobody wants to do it. And it's that lit review. For some odd reason, I just like it. And it's one of the chef things, I think. We just like to work hard and think we're not getting it out of it. Christine, what say you?
Sorry. So I definitely love always having your goal and mission, because that helps you make decisions. It also helps you kind of, really kind of go forward. I too have worked on some really, amazing teams. When I used to work at the Convention and Visitors Bureau in Philadelphia, our goals were landing all of these national, citywide conventions, and the Republican National Convention, the Democratic National Convention. We have in 2026 here the World Cup. So it was great. And one thing that really was wonderful when I worked there was we would celebrate the victories. So a lot of times when you're on a high performing team, you're going and you're going and you're going, and you don't take a step back to say, wow, we did this. And I guess, Tom, this goes back to the courage and and being able to go forward, celebrating, and it can be, something. They used to do really cool stuff, like, on a Friday, they'd bring in like popcorn with toppings and celebrate the fact that in Q1 we did this. And so I think really, having your goal and your mission, really fostering your team, and then celebrating the victories, I think is super, super important.
I love that. Again, I'm a celebratory guy kind of thing. And I love that celebration aspect. And I can't stress that enough, Christine. I completely agree that that's so much part of what they're looking. It's part of it's the little hidden goal for ourselves, right? We know when we're done with this, we are going to have a good time together. We're going to celebrate. We're going to laugh. We're going to cry. We're going to just sweat everything else out because it's taken a year, right? And you think about, I was just working with some colleagues on textbook, and other colleagues on a research paper that was sitting there and got rejected and had to go to a different journal, and going, oh my gosh, you just want to quit because you're almost like defeated. But you keep going, and it's just like, we all knew what we were going to do. We all knew it was a really good project, but you just had to keep going at them. And we know at the end, we're celebrating in Montreal. Let me just tell you that right now. Ethan, what say you?
Yeah, so I agree with both speakers, and I was just a leader. We should be transparent, no matter good or bad. If it's good, so like other speaker says, celebrate a victory. If it's bad, we just need to find some solution, make a better outcome in the future. So give them good feedback. I think feedback is important. Make them see the future. So giving some career advancement, professional development, I think definitely helps a lot. And finally, celebrate again once they accomplish it. So work with them, guide them together, work hard, and then finally achieve make it success. So I think those are definitely important to make a high performance team.
Thank you.
Yes, I think the most high performing team I have worked on was characterized by a clear and shared vision, clear roles and responsibilities, and a strong communication and trust. And the thing that I love is positive and supportive environment.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, we've come to the end of this wonderful fourth installment of Learners to Leaders series here on peak performance. I think we probably exhausted all the specific areas, but interestingly enough, each of the 6 different areas that we discussed today could really be a whole hour topic in just itself if we really deep dive into it and look at all the specific areas. So I want to thank the panelists today for joining us. Again, our illustrious panels. I love all of you. I can't wait to see some of you if you're joining us next month in Montreal for ICRE conference. And join us next month. Save the date for Friday, July 19th. We will have another installment, our 5th installment of the Learners to Leaders series. And with that, I wish you all a great, wonderful day, evening, and night. We will see you next time.
Welcome to Hospitality Internships, the premier global talent network.